it feels like the future's a little bit bleak when it comes to that, and I'm sure it will turn around at some point. Um, but I think working in the charities we've worked in, there's always been a lot of work on evidence in the human-animal bond and the benefits that humans get from their pets. And when you think that, some people, it is their only companion, it's their only reason to go out the house every day to go for a dog walk. And just in those stories I've read out, someone's been widowed and that's their family pet, that's her company every day. To think that they won't be able to have pets because of the cost of living and the price of vet bills, really depressing.
Welcome to The Consult Room, the podcast where we explore the evolving world of modern pet care. I'm Dr. Paul Mactolo, a UK veterinary surgeon with a deep passion for pet health and welfare. In each episode, I'll be exploring key issues, challenging perspectives, and offering expert insight and practical advice. Because ultimately, my mission is to improve the lives of pets and the people who love them. Today's episode asks a big question. Is the UK heading for a veterinary care crisis? Now, one of the clearest signs is the rapid growth of the Blue Cross Veterinary Care Fund, a scheme that helps people who can't afford the cost of their pet's treatment. The scheme was launched in 2023 with just 23 practices registered, but demand has since exploded with more than 1,700 practices now registered across the UK. Now, that rise tells us something powerful. More and more pet guardians are struggling to afford the treatment their animals need. So what does this say about the UK right now, and what does it mean for the future of pet healthcare? That's what we're going to explore in today's conversation. And to help me do that, I'm joined by Dannii Thorington-Neve, Head of Veterinary Strategy at Blue Cross, who leads the fund. Dannii has worked in the charity veterinary sector for over 12 years, and she's passionate about making sure every pet can access affordable care, no matter their owner's financial situation. Dannii, welcome to the Consult Room.
Hi.
So, Dannii, do you think we're in a veterinary care crisis right now, or is that too strong a phrase?
No, absolutely. I think we are. I think we're seeing the evidence of that in our vet care fund, in our hospitals, and in our rehoming centres at Blue Cross.
And recent reports have suggested that fewer owners are attending veterinary practices. The Cats Protection estimated around 4 million cats aren't getting regular veterinary care, largely because of cost. And I think the PDSA poll report found a quarter of vets have noticed clients delaying or avoiding visits due to affordability. Do you see this purely as a cost of living issue, or do you think there are sort of deeper, more systemic problems in the veterinary sector?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think the cost of living is playing a role. I think people's disposable income is shrinking every year, certainly the poorest in society, and vet fees are going up. So I think when you combine the two, people with less money and vet fees being higher, people are waiting longer until they come and see us, which then just makes treatment more expensive because stuff has gone on longer. So yeah, I think it's a combination of factors.
And coming back to that, you're saying that people are delaying treatment and animals are presenting more sort of poorly. Is that a pattern that you're seeing at the moment in the charity sector?
Certainly. I mean, looking at our hospitals specifically, we're seeing cases of more complex hospitalisation rising. So stuff that's coming in is staying in hospital longer, needing much more care. And the treatments that we're needing to give them are more complex because they've waited that bit longer. So absolutely.
So before we sort of dive into this subject, because I know we're going to have a lot to talk about here, from your personal perspective, what drew you into the charity sector, and what sort of motivates you in your role as the head of veterinary strategy at Blue Cross?
So why charity? I guess for me, I think I'm really passionate about the people and the pets element. The two of those things together is what gets me up every morning and makes me really enjoy my job. I think pets bring so much to our lives, and more evidence is showing us people's lives are changing in ways that they've not really done in the past because of the sort of cost of living crisis and the financial situations people end up in without much fault of their own. I think for me, trying to keep pets with their owners through tricky times is really important. So what motivates me to get up every morning and do my job at Blue Cross is how we keep pets and people together by delivering veterinary care that's affordable and pragmatic, and having other ways of reaching out into communities using private practices to support people in need. I think we need to come together as a veterinary community to support people now and from what we can see into it for many years to come, really, because the landscape isn't looking promising in terms of poverty. It's set to really change. So I think for me, that's a bit that's really important. We're not going to solve this in the here and now. We've got a lot of work to do as a veterinary community.
I guess there's a disclaimer here, isn't it? Because we actually work together at Blue Cross. But before that, we actually worked together at PDSA as well, where I think you spent sort of 10 years, about a decade there.
Yeah. A great 10 years working at PDSA as their central operations manager, supporting the field team delivering that service.
And do you feel like you found your place now? Because, obviously people move into charity for all sorts of reasons, but do you feel that this is where your heart lies now?
I think so. I feel like I make a difference, and I feel like what we do and what PDSA did in helping people and their pets is really important to me, and it's keeps people together with their family members. I've got cats, and they are part of your family, aren't they? And I can't imagine losing my job or becoming sick and having to give up a family member because I couldn't afford them. So yeah, I think this is my place. I feel like I found where I'm supposed to be.
So let's dive into the Veterinary Care Fund, because it's quite a unique scheme, isn't it? And it's probably one of the most successful initiatives or collaborations between the private and the charity sector, certainly that I've seen. But the fund started with about 23 practices, and now there are over 1,700 signed up nationwide. So talk us through how it works and why it's grown so quickly.
So the scheme is driven by practices, and I think that's where the success of the scheme lies. It's very simple in principle, and when the scheme was designed and relaunched in 2023, all of the red tape and the complexities of previous schemes were removed. So if a vet is in a consult room and they've got an owner in front of them and they think that owner is in financial hardship, our fund is there to help. And we have some really simple principles around prognosis being good, preserving a good quality of life, and the vet can then apply on the owner's behalf if they believe that they're in a situation and they need some support. And so we've made it really simple. You don't need to, I think all previous other schemes, and including our hospital service, you need to prove you're on benefits to be able to access. But we've taken that away from the Vet Care Fund because we sort of know that there are people out there in communities that might not be on benefits that are really struggling. And in some of the feedback we get from people that have accessed the scheme is really telling us that. So the practice applies using a simple online form. We respond within a day, giving them a PO number as long as it fits our criteria. And then we wait for the clinical history to come once whatever's happens. And then we pay the practice directly. That gets deducted from the owner's bill. So it's really slick and removes all the paperwork. And that's the idea, is that we wanted to make this really easy for practices to engage with rather than making them have to jump through quite a lot of hoops to access the scheme.
So it's made very simple from a sort of a application perspective. But I just wanted to go back to those principles because I think they're really important, aren't they? Because I think there is the sense that, veterinary costs are rising, but you say the criteria for the scheme fits that sort of welfare focused prognosis and quality of life, which is kind of important to make sure the charity funds are spent in the right way, isn't it?
Yeah, so the principles are that the prognosis should be good and the treatment preserves a good quality of life. Surgery should be anticipated to be curative, and euthanasia obviously falls into that. So we want to make sure that we're funding the right stuff and aligning to our hospital service in that way as well, I guess, because that's the sort of service that we offer through our hospital. So it brings an outreach or third party service that we're supporting more aligned to how we're operating within the charity sector, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really important, isn't it, that because actually those are really good principles for when you're sort of considering any welfare grounded treatment, aren't they? Is this treatment going to improve the quality of life? Is it Is it going to improve the pet's welfare? And is it deemed, if it's a big surgical procedure, will it be curative? Because otherwise you're talking about treatments that aren't necessarily improving, aren't they? So it's a really good alignment, I think. In 2024, I think the stats are that over sort of 3,000 pets were supported with grants that were averaging about £214,
Yeah.
which I think, in the context of some, we know the cost of some veterinary procedures, that might sound really modest, but for a lot of families, that's sort of the difference between, being able to go ahead with treatment and or facing an impossible situation. So do you have any stories or testimonials that's really capture the impact that grant has had?
Yes, I've got lots. So before I give you some of the testimonials, one of the questions we ask of people that have been awarded some support is whether our contribution significantly helped them manage their vet bill. And 96% of the people that responded said yes, that it did, which is really powerful, I think. Of the 4% that said it didn't, their bills tended to be £4,000-5,000 upwards for something really significant. So yes, in those situations, it may not have made a significant difference, but that's such a small part of the people we're helping. So I think that's really promising. In terms of some testimonials, let me read a few out to you. So my vet practice accessed a fund on my behalf, and without this help, my cat would have not received the treatment it required and would have endured a painful demise. I'm recently widowed and would have had to sell precious but not valuable possessions to pay for a dear old friend to be put down. The next one's from an owner that said, I've recently been through some really bad times. I've had cancer and then chemo, and then my relationship ended. And I've got nerve damage due to that chemo, and I've been very depressed because of this whole situation. My wonderful friend Buddy has been by my side throughout all of this. And when he became poorly, I panicked and cried because of his pain. I couldn't even imagine losing him. I didn't have the money to help him, and I was so scared of what would happen. And when you granted the funding, I was elated. My buddy could get his treatment that he needed, and I had my friend and companion back, and I cannot express the gratitude to you at Blue Cross.
I think you're getting quite tearful reading that out, aren't you?
They're really moving.
Yeah.
And just to note, I am 8.5 months pregnant, so hormones are very much at the surface.
Well, I can feel myself tearing up as well, so I don't have that excuse.
Don't have
I
that
think it's like, because you can talk about the numbers, can't you, of how many thousands of pets a scheme like this helps, but it's really those individual stories, isn't it, that really bring it to life. And what these testimonials do is they immediately take you into a place where you sort of appreciate the circumstances that person's in, but also how much that pet means to them and how worried they are about it and how grateful they are to still have it in their life. They're amazing stories. Have you got any more?
Yeah, loads.
Go on, let's hear some more.
I'll try not to cry. So, and I've tried to pull a few that sort of tell a bit of a story of people's different circumstances. So this person said it made a massive difference. We had insurance, but we were at the end of it. So we'd already used up our limit. So your help meant that our dog could have the surgery they needed. So, an owner that's got insurance, trying to do the right thing, but still really struggling to pay their vet bills. This person said, having your support was like having a weight lifted off my shoulders. Bruno's operation was badly needed, but I didn't have enough funds, even after saving up for a whole year. And I was so thankful when the vet mentioned your scheme and sorted it for us. Thank you so much. We are so very grateful. So yeah, people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds in very different situations, really needing Blue Cross's support. And I think it tells the story of how poverty is changing in the UK, and how us as charities need to adapt to support people through some of that.
We're going to do a bit of a dive into the poverty landscape in the UK, but I just wanted to make a point in that, just reading out some of those sort of stories, they're almost like thank you letters, aren't they? And
Yeah.
we sort of go through our day, and I know, anybody that works in any sort of service industry, you just turn up for work every day, don't you? You do the job, and to be able to pause and understand the impact at an individual level, I think is what gives everything real power, doesn't it, and meaning. Because I know, especially in your role and particularly in my role, we're looking at numbers on
Yeah.
spreadsheets, aren't we? And we're trying to have big impacts, and we're using the resources we have to drive numbers, but it's nothing as powerful, is it, than just pausing and hearing from the people that you helped.
Yeah, I mean, that's 4 out of the 3,500, 4,000 people we've helped in the last 12 months. So very small in the scheme of things, but on an individual basis, so moving and powerful. And it's what I think keeps people like us in charity work and gets us up in the morning, because we're really making a difference that individual. The impact is huge. Those folks going home with their entire family. That's why we're here.
They're amazing, and I think, yeah, absolutely, they're really great to share. Well, with your team internally, but also other people as well, isn't it? Just to really demonstrate the impact of how good this scheme is.
Just when we bring these to life for our teams, it really shows the value of the work they do, because processing tickets or work and applications for a fund can sometimes seem like a bit, you're on a bit of a treadmill. But when we play these back to the teams and they read the survey responses, and we get some really great feedback from practices as well, because we've enabled, these practices are in communities supporting these people. It really helps them understand the role that they play is pivotal in helping keep pets and people together. So I think they're important for all of us to reflect on and keep reminding ourselves the numbers are one thing, but the impact's another, isn't it?
So how have the practices sort of responded to this one? Because obviously they are absolutely fundamental and instrumental in delivering this part of the scheme. How have they sort of responded to this? Because obviously there's been an explosion in sign-ups, but I suppose another question is, are there any sort of regional or case type patterns that have surprised you when you're looking at the applications?
So I guess how have practices responded incredibly. I mean, you talked at the beginning about there being 23 start, and now there's 1,700 signed up. I think those volumes speak for itself. And I guess to caveat those numbers, we didn't market this scheme. That is organic word of mouth growth, and that we've had to pause now because our fund is limited. The practices have been incredible and really supportive, and have really helped us understand and develop it as we've gone along on the journey. And that, when I look at the data side of it, they're really spotting and identifying the right cases to use the fund for, and supporting us as a charity to make sure that our money is going as far as possible and to the right people. So yeah, we couldn't do it without them. And, I've been around in this charity world for a little bit. And like you, I think this is probably the most successful partnership scheme for delivering charitable funds across the UK that there's been for some time. It's working. Demand far outstrips, the funds that Blue Cross has. And I guess that's a sign of the times. But yeah, we couldn't do it without them, and they've been incredible. In terms of, have we spotted anything? I guess from previous experience of other funds, getting practices in all the right spots across the UK is tricky. So we've always struggled to engage with practices in the Highlands or Mid Wales or down in the South Coast, because they're much more sparsely spread, and we don't have that challenge. I think the current stats are that our Blue Cross service covers 93, nearly 94% of the UK. We're currently doing a bit of deep dive work into that gap to understand, are they deprived areas where that gap is or not, to help us understand whether we need to fill it, So yeah, I think we're in a good spot, and it highlights, I think, the work done to design the scheme was the right work. It is simple, easy to access, isn't hard work for vets, and we're quick at, facilitating the fund.
Going back to the cost of veterinary care, it's been published in the media that veterinary care costs have risen by around 60% since 2015. And part of the CMA investigation was around transparency on pricing. But I just wondered what your thoughts were on why you think veterinary care is so expensive today, and what could practices do to sort of explain it better?
It's an interesting question, I guess. As a non-clinician, I think I think medicine's changed and continues to change with the pace of the world that's changing with us. So there's always more advances, more drugs and tests available to us, which people want to use, understandably, to help pets. So I think that plays a role, and it's something that's happening everywhere, isn't it? I think in terms of practices explaining prices better to owners, the CMA have talked about transparency, and I think that's something we're working hard on within our hospitals. And we've had a really big focus in terms of, what we charge and why we charge stuff, and trying to make stuff as simple as possible. I think more of that is needed. We've got a lot of work to do in terms of simplifying what your vet fees are and what it is you're paying for exactly. I think it's a bit like going to the doctor, isn't it? You go to the doctor and you just sort of nod along a lot of the time. I think when you're in the room with these people, and I think we need to stand back a little bit and really take our time to explain to owners the options for treatment, the different costs of them, the consequences of them. And I know that happens already out there, but I think now more than ever, when people's pockets are pinched, I think giving more choice of treatment with the associated different costs is really important for people to make the right choices for them at this point in time.
You mentioned there, medicine's advanced. There's new tests, there's new drugs, but it feels like the whole sector's, sort of moved along in a similar fashion. And I don't know. I always use the analogy of a supermarket. So you can make choices about where you shop,
Yeah.
can't you? You can shop in a sort of an Aldi, or you can shop in a Waitrose, and a lot of people mix and match, like myself. But it's really unclear, isn't it, in sort of veterinary practices, whether you are, getting a budget service or a very high end service. And I'm not sure even if there is many budget services out there, because there's such high expectations, isn't it? Not just from pet guardians, but also from vets as well. They want to work in environments where, they have access to lots of toys and diagnostic tools and things like that. But do you think there is more of a market going forwards to have more budget options for veterinary care?
I think so. I think pet owners are driving that already. I think from some of the stuff that we see in clinical notes coming through from our Vet Care Fund practices, you can see that owners are pushing the issue on things like, I'm opting to not have the pre-op bloods to keep costs down. So we're seeing owners driving that stuff. And I think with access to more stuff online, people, owners will be doing that for us. So I think we do need to make sure, whether it's a more budget offering or whether what we offer within existing practices is more pragmatic and owners get more choice in terms of treatment options.
It's sort of, the problem is quite complex, isn't it? Because there is a rising, a backdrop of rising costs against this financial pressures on household. And I know that you've done a lot of research on poverty that shows that families are getting poorer and poorer year on year. Which group of people are being sort of most affected by this?
So the lower third, basically. So when I look at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation's data, which is incredible in terms of insight, they split income earners income earners into thirds, and the lowest third is dropping and dropping and dropping. The current forecasts that they've got spread out to 2030. Highest income earners are dropping slightly, and the middle income earners are dropping a little bit more, but the lowest income earners are dropping another 6% in the next 5 years. So the poorest in our country are getting poorer, and these figures are based on the income you have left after you've paid your housing. So if that market changes as well and rent keeps going up, that will overinflate these numbers even more. So we've got a real crisis that's getting worse. It's not stabilising, isn't showing any signs of stabilising in the next few years.
And I suppose that begs the question, doesn't it, about whether people will be able to afford to have pets at all in the future, which is quite quite worrying, isn't it? You know, I came from a background where my grandparents, for example, didn't have a lot of money, and yet would always have a dog as a sort of a family companion. But I suppose it begs the question: is that going to be a change in society that we see?
Yeah, I think so. I think, from a Blue Cross rehoming perspective, we are seeing increases in relinquishment due to affordability. It's happening already. Do we think it'll get worse? Yes, because people are having to make really tough choices about how they survive the month. And pet ownership, I think, people will either relinquish pets they've got because they feel that they can't look after them in the here and now, and certainly won't be getting any more. So, yeah, it's really sad that it's becoming more of a privilege to own a pet than it ever has done in the past, where everyone was able to, be a pet owner and,
Mm.
enjoy the privilege of that.
Yeah, and I guess, from a personal perspective, I've dedicated probably the last 2 decades of my life working for organisations that really do allow that keeping people and pets together. So, and like you say, when you think about it as a bigger societal question, it's very easy to say, well, if you can't afford it, then you shouldn't have pets.
Yeah.
I guess you could say the same thing about children as well. And I know many people are, making choices, but it feels really sad, doesn't it? Because when you take it down into an individual level, and, I'm sure if somebody sat and read the 3,000, the testimonials that you got last year from people that access the Veterinary Care Fund, you'd be in no doubt about the importance of people to have pets who are, for a lot of people, their only companion, isn't it? So it's hard, isn't it, to think about it like that.
It's really sad. It is really sad. And from doing the work I've been doing, when I got to the end of it, I've been like, well, it feels like the future's a little bit bleak when it comes to that. And I'm sure it will turn around at some point. Um, but I think working in the charities we've worked in, there's always been a lot of work on evidencing the human animal bond and the benefits that humans get from their pets. And when you think that, some people, it is their only companion, it's their only reason to go out the house every day to go for a dog walk. And just in those stories I've read out, someone's been widowed and that's their family pet, that's her company
Mm.
every day. To think that they won't be able to have pets because of the cost of living and the price of vet bills, really depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, access to veterinary care, it kind of involves so many players, doesn't it? We've got charities, obviously, like Blue Cross, like who we both work for. There's the wider veterinary profession. There's, the private sector. There's insurers, and of course, pet owners themselves. But like you said, the CMA is sort of now reviewing the sector. How do you think the responsibility should be shared, and who do you think needs to step up right now to solve this problem? I mean, it's a very big question. I get that, but have you got any sort of groundbreaking, innovative ideas that can solve this problem for us?
I think more than ever, we all need to work together. I think charities need to come together more than we ever have done before, alongside the rest of the veterinary profession. I think if we want to keep pets with their owners, and we don't want it to become a privilege for only the wealthiest, then we need to work together. And I think charities have a unique skill set in how we can help the profession with some of that stuff. I know in our hospitals, we offer an incredible service, and I think the wider profession could potentially, we could work together on some of that stuff, that they could take some learnings from the way that we approach, veterinary medicine, along with other charities. So I think between all of us, there's a lot of knowledge that we could share that we're currently not sharing.
And can I just quickly talk about insurance? Because it's often been suggested as a solution or a part of what people consider responsible pet ownership. And I really don't like the word responsible, because I think it's quite divisive, and it's quite subjective in my personal opinion. But the reality of insurance is that premiums are climbing. People have had to cancel pet insurance because of financial pressures. And you even read out a testimonial earlier whereby somebody was insured, but they'd reached the limit of what they could claim,
Yeah.
which meant that they still needed charitable financial support. So is insurance realistic for owners in the current climate?
I don't think so. I think that the monthly premiums are too high. I think most practices, our practice now, will only do is it a direct claim, so you pay and then you have to make the claim yourself. And when that bill, I think recently we were looking at some treatment options for one of our cats, and it was going to be a couple of grand. And to find that upfront to pay and to then have to claim back afterwards, not knowing what that delay looks like, tricky for most. So I think, yeah, is it worth its money, I guess is the question. And I think a lot of people, and I know with our clients, they're savvy with money, are opting to choose to put money to one side every month where they know that they can access it for emergencies. It's just how far that money goes now.
So if you could change one thing tomorrow to improve access to affordable care, what would it be?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think getting people through the door is really important. I think I don't know the reasons why people are waiting longer. Is it the consult fee is inaccessible? Is it the worry about what might come afterwards? But I think if we can get people through the door at an accessible price for a consult, then we can prevent suffering. We can have honest conversations about what stuff is looking like. And I think what falls out the back of that then is much better than someone worrying about a really high consult that is inaccessible and they're going to wait 2 or 3 months longer when we know a lot changes in that time. So I think for me it's making access really affordable for people at the front end.
And what do you think, what is the role of sort of individual vets and nurses in that sort of accessibility to care?
It's tricky, isn't it, I guess, because a lot of the time vets and nurses don't have control over the price point, so it's not that part of it. I think what we need from vets and nurses is the right conversations, giving owners choice, and a wide range of different options for treatment in a language that's understandable to the general public, which I think sometimes is a barrier as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is also where the vet and or the nurse and the client sort of meet, isn't it? And I often talk publicly, guiding sort of pet guardians to be very clear and realistic about their budgets up
Yeah.
front. And I know it's a really hard one, that, isn't it? We know that the relationship with our pets has changed quite significantly. We're not just talking about dogs and cats, we're talking about members of the family. And we find it very difficult, I think, especially in the UK, to start assigning, well, what is my limit of spend on this, being that I now view as a member of the family or a child. Because we're not exposed to healthcare costs like some other countries might be, for example, the States, because we've got the NHS as that big safety net, haven't we? So, but it is important, isn't it, to be very clear with the vets, what you're willing to spend or what your budget is. But do you think people feel guilty about that, talking about that? Because, like I say, if you're viewing your pet as a member of the family, it's quite hard, isn't it?
It is, but I think at the moment stuff's getting to such a pinch point. It's, do I do that or can I afford to feed my children? Like people are really getting in a pickle financially, and there's tons of stuff on the Joseph Rentry Foundation's website around choices people are making, and I think in the past that may have been different, those decisions and those conversations, but I think now because stuff is so tight, they're just having to make really hard choices, and I think that's the role of where we play as clinicians is saying, well, these are your choices. This is what we can do to help, and these are the impacts and consequences of them. It might be that some of it is not practical. If you've got a diabetic dog that needs an injection every day, it could be the practicalities of something over the cost of something. And I think those conversations are important. Nothing's set in stone anymore, or is a given in terms of we go in and this is the treatment you're going to get for your pet if it's got that thing. I think, it's very different now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the media's got quite a bit to play, hasn't it, in terms of setting expectations. I remember when I was doing most of my sort of surgical work, I don't do as much anymore. I did a lot of orthopedics, fixing broken bones and things like that. And it was at the sort of the heyday of these various programs that were coming on about, behind the scenes in vets. And I had people asking for, prosthetic legs for their dogs and things like that. And this was in a charity setting as well. And when you sort of say to them, you can certainly, I can explore that for you, but it will be a referral procedure. And we're talking, between 10 and £20,000. And people are shocked because we don't talk about it on the media. We don't talk about how much these advanced procedures are. So everybody's there thinking, oh, this is an option and I can access that. And they're becoming quite demanding sometimes, and it is a challenge, isn't it? Getting that balance right about what's available, but what's also affordable as well.
Yeah. And I think it's really hard for vets and nurses in a consult room now more than ever, because anyone could go onto Google and say, my dog's got this, 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 and this. What do you think it is? And what treatments are there? And you get an AI summary within 20 seconds that's a vet's being told, well, this AI bot says something different. So I think it's really challenging because, who's right or wrong from a client's perspective? Vets and nurses are in a really tricky position now more than ever with the rise of AI, I think.
So on a personal level, when you look at the Veterinary Care Fund, it's obviously stepped into a space. It is absolutely needed right now in society. But what would you see as the future for this? What's your vision for the fund and the problem that you're trying to solve?
I mean, my immediate problem is that I don't have enough money. I have to close the scheme halfway, 2/3 of the way through the month, every month, because we don't have enough money. We've got limited resources as a charity. So my immediate problem would be some donations to help fund that. I guess longer term would be the societal wide stuff around solving the root cause. So why is this needed? We know everything we've talked about describes why it's needed. And a shift in the cost of living, which isn't in our gift, and a shift in veterinary fees, which we can hopefully play some part of as part of the wider veterinary community.
If we think about what's at stake if we don't solve this problem, can you talk me through what your biggest concerns would be? And if you are actually seeing some reasons to be hopeful? So I'm asking sort of the worst case scenario, but actually, do you think it's the reality, or are you hopeful about the future?
I'm always hopeful. I think from everything I've been looking at around deprivation and poverty, I think the next 5 years might be quite bleak, but it will turn around. The bit that worries me the most is that we get to a place where pet ownership is only for the very wealthy and no one else gets to benefit from the joy of animals, in the way that we have done for so long. So, and I don't think that will be the case. In the meantime, we've got lots of people in a real pickle financially with pets that they're desperate to keep and potentially struggling to help meet their welfare needs. And it's how we act in the meantime in this short term before things take a positive turn to support those owners, so we don't end up with rehoming centres full of pets and no one rehoming them because no one's got no money. It's a bit of a sad state of affairs.
Are you hopeful?
Yeah. I mean, more than anything, as a mother, I think I hope that the financial situation of the country changes, because it would be a sign of other things if it doesn't. So I think for that reason, I am hopeful. I think it will turn. I don't think it's going to be this side of 2030 though.
And if you could, I suppose, in the meantime, then in the here and now, in the problems that we're facing, if you could give one message to pet guardians and one to the veterinary profession, what would they be?
I think to pet guardians would be speak to your vets and nurses as soon as possible if you think there's something wrong with your pets. We, as a profession, are here to help. We want to make the pets better. That's why vets and nurses study what they do. They want to fix animals and keep them with their owners. So trust us that we'll give you the right choices, and our intentions are really good. I think there's been quite a bit of mistrust and the media's got a bit of a role to play in that with the profession, and that's not the reality of the time I've spent working in this world. Vets and nurses just want to fix stuff, make them better. So come to us as soon as possible. That will help keep your costs down in the long term, for sure. And I think in terms of the profession, is to make that first consult accessible, get people through the doors, early doors, so that we can help them manage their costs and keep their pets at home with them as part of the family.
That's great. I think I would echo both of those. I think even though there is quite a lot of negativity in the media, it's still really promising to see that trust is still quite high with the profession, because ultimately we've got, two groups of people. We've got people that have pets at home. We've got vets and nurses in practice that both want to do the same thing. They want to keep those pets really, really healthy. And, when the media portrays, the profession as sort of money grabbing and things like that, it really doesn't help with that trust. But I was really encouraged to see a recent survey where trust is still pretty high in the profession, which makes your advice, really good. Really great. I do ask everybody one sort of final question, Dannii, and this is something around if there is a pet or a person who has inspired you in your career, really sort of explain how they've influenced your path.
There probably isn't any one, which I know is a bit of a get out, but I think working with charity vets and nurses for the past 12 years has changed me working in our profession. I think that the vets and nurses in our hospitals, in charity hospitals, are just incredible what they do all day, every day. I think it's really inspiring. So I think they've really helped shape me and my career and my desire to stay in this world. And I guess from an animal perspective, it's really interesting, isn't it? I guess that we've got a cat called Bear, who's just a love bug. All he wants is love and cuddles, and he's just entirely present. And I think we've all got a lot to learn from animals in terms of just being in the moment and trying not to fret about all of these things, some of the things we've been talking about. So yeah, I think we could all take a little bit of that away from animals.
It sounds like he's more dog than cat. I mean, I think about Rodney and he is so aloof and he just likes his own me time and his me space. And very occasionally he'll come and, want to interact with you. But it sounds like Bear's more of a dog and Rodney's more like a cat, I think.
Yeah, he is a little bit. He's constantly like, "Excuse me now, it's time for a cuddle. I need to see what you're doing and pick me up and hold me like a baby."
Whereas if me and Chris are talking too loud, Rodney will get up a huff and walk out the room and go sit somewhere else, as if to say, "Well, you two just shut up."
Oh my days! No.
But Dannii, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing those really valuable insights about the great work that you and the Blue Cross are doing. I think for me, the conversation has just really highlighted how complex the issue of veterinary care access has become, but also how initiatives like the Veterinary Care Fund are making a real difference. So I'm really grateful for you and your innovation in the profession and all the great work you do. So, thanks to everyone that's tuning in, and we'll see you all next time at the consult room.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode. You'll find all the relevant links to this conversation in the show notes. If you enjoyed it, please follow us and leave a review. It really helps other people discover the podcast. For more insights on topics like this, you can connect with me on social media at Dr. Paul the Vet, or check out my website, theconsultroom.co.uk.